I'm Lara Matosian, host of the Adjacent Possible podcast. The Adjacent Possible is a kind of shadow future, hovering on the edges of the present state of things, a map of all the ways in which the present can reinvent itself. This podcast is all about probing what's possible, what's probable, and what's preferable in education. Join us as we explore how we can overhaul our current pedagogical systems, solve global grand challenges, and bring about civilization-level change. The Adjacent Possible podcast is held in partnership with Area 2071, which is part of the Dubai Future Foundation. The Adjacent Possible podcast is also supported by Academy, a global educational organization that offers future-focused and wisdom-based education to high school learners with the aim of preparing them for a world of automation, artificial intelligence, and accelerating change. Our guest today is Noah Raford. Welcome to the Adjacent Possible podcast. You join me, your host, Lara Matosian, and our guest, Noah Raford, Futurist-in-Chief of the Dubai Future Foundation. Noah, welcome.
Thanks so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. I love the title of this podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. It's such a busy time. So tell us, what are the roles and responsibilities of a Futurist-in-Chief?
That's a great question. The role of the futurist is something which has evolved over the last 60 or 70 years in formal title. I mean, many people originally cite Rand and Herman Kahn and these sorts of early military strategists for starting to do the original futures thinking, particularly around, unfortunately, sort of nuclear warfare scenarios. It was popularized in the corporate world in the 70s by Shell and Pierre Wack, who is considered to be the kind of godfather of what we would now consider corporate scenario planning. But I always like to say that the role of the futurist goes back many, many thousands of years before that. Before helping to create the Dubai Future Foundation, I was an advisor in the PMO here, the UAE Prime Minister's office. And the word advisor has a very interesting root because in Arabic it's wazir, right? And that is the origin of the word wizard. So the vizier and the wizir, or the advisor, are the people that would support the leadership, whispering wisdom into their ears and trying to help them both make better tactical decisions, but keep a strategic perspective on the grand picture. So I think the futurist role goes back thousands and thousands of years. It has origins in this part of the world, in the UAE and in the Gulf. And the current incarnation of it as Futurist-in-Chief is just someone who helps advise leadership on the big picture and then how to make strategic decisions in the short term to help realize a better future for us all.
What do you think? Should more organizations and ministries have a Futurist-in-Chief?
Absolutely. I think, and that's one of the most exciting opportunities that we have here within the Dubai Future Foundation, because we sit at the center of Dubai government and have very close relationships with all of the different government departments and state-owned enterprises. And one of our core jobs is helping to train a generation of futurists, train a generation of wizards to play their role in their organization. Because one, I think the weaknesses of futurism in general, and it often gets criticized as being overly general, sort of a generalist of all things but a master of none. And where the real rubber meets the road for foresight and for strategic foresight and the advisory services is when you actually know something about the field that you're talking about. And so having a cadre of trained transportation futurists, energy futurists, cultural futurists across the Dubai government and the private sector is something which is really starting to differentiate Dubai and the UAE from, I would say, other corporate or government foresight offices, which are primarily focused on the policy aspect of things.
Okay, so tell us some more about that, because we know that you have a lot of exciting initiatives at the Dubai Future Foundation.
Sure. Well, maybe would it help to rewind a little bit and just explain a bit about what the Dubai Future Foundation is and how we came about? Because I think there's an interesting lesson in how foresight itself and futurism itself is evolving that we've experienced over the last few years. So, as I mentioned, I was working in the Prime Minister's office here, responsible for innovation and foresight. And what we found was that, putting it bluntly, nobody read anything we were writing. So the traditional approach to foresight consulting or strategy consulting or policy consulting in any realm is to essentially produce technical reports, white papers, maybe a PowerPoint. And this is what you often get when you buy futures services in the market today. And the thing that is interesting about the UAE is it's so fast-moving, and the decisions that have to be made on a day-to-day basis have to take into account a much longer time frame because the pace of change is so rapid that we realized the written word wasn't the best means of engaging our senior stakeholders. So we started getting into exploratory speculative design to try to use things from the arts, the tools and techniques of media and creative advertising to start to engage a bigger stakeholder group in a more rich understanding about the future. And that led to the first Museum of the Future, which was a temporary exhibition at the World Government Summit back in 2015, which was really at the time the largest collection of designers and architects and technologists creating future visions that you could actually experience in a way that suggested a hopeful, positive potential outcome.
Yes, I remember that one.
That was we got really lucky. That was kind of a phenomenon. It came out of left field. The leadership was very supportive in taking a big risk, assembling all these design fiction people together and putting it in such a high-profile place. But that was the beginning of what ultimately became the Dubai Future Foundation itself. Because what we found was using design and the techniques of theater and modern media to communicate what might be possible in the future had this funny unintended consequence of people actually wanting what we were showing them.
Yes.
So you can think about design as the sort of manufacturer of desire in some respects, and that's often weaponized in the advertising world to sell us things that we don't necessarily want or need. And so this merging of what we would consider traditional foresight and futures and strategy and policy disciplines with architecture, industrial design, interaction design, film design, theater design, to create a more rich experience of a possible future in the form of a room that you could walk into and experience what the future of healthcare might be like.
Yes.
And oh wait, surprise, it's your bathroom. Started to engage people in a way that people understood it immediately. You get that visceral feeling about what is possible without needing to know anything about jargon like what is AI or machine learning or ubiquitous computing or any of these things. And then because it was instantiated as these tangible objects, these physical experiences, people were like, I get it, I want it. And the key, like the penny drop moment for us was actually during the very first Museum of the Future when the former Minister of Education, we had a big sort of digital sand table imagining what the future of the classroom might be like. And it was beautiful and dynamic and tactile and people working together in groups to solve problems. There weren't any teachers, there weren't any tests, and there weren't any books. And not only did he understand it immediately, but he said, this is great. I'll take 300 of these.
300 of these.
And I said, oh, Your Excellency, I'm really, really sorry. This isn't real. I thought we had explained that at the beginning of this. This is kind of an experience of what might be possible. We're using today's technology to simulate what might be possible in the future tomorrow. But he kind of looked at me like I was stupid and kind of knocked on it. And he said, you built one. Like, build 299 more. And that's when we realized this mode of engaging people in a conversation about the future was not only a better way of communicating and engaging them, but also created demand for those services and products that makes a better world. So out of that, the Dubai Future Foundation was created, originally to manage the construction of the permanent Museum of the Future that will be opening in 2020. It's just around the corner from where we're having this interview in Emirates
Looking
Towers.
good already.
Send you some recent pictures of the construction. But also to manage the demand that people were coming to us with to realize that future. So the Dubai Future Foundation has this tagline, see the future, imagine, envision, create the future. And so those two, the sort of left and the right hand of imagining a better world with our partners in technology and academia and corporate sector and government, and then doing real projects, real world projects that start to take a big step in that direction are what we do in the foundation. And that has expressed itself in everything from the world's first and still to date only fully functional 3D printed building right around the corner from here, the Future Accelerators program where we first met you guys, where we are right now, Area 2071, which is a massive co-working and innovation kind of cultural acceleration space. All of these are in the service of trying to imagine a better world and then take steps, action-oriented steps to actually make those real and provide proof points today.
So you just touched upon the first 3D printed office. Can you tell us a little more about what plans you have for 3D printing in Dubai?
So this is one of the most exciting projects which I had the opportunity to work on. It also gets at one of the other things which I think anybody working in innovation or design or future making grapples with on a daily basis. And that's the fact that in many cases, doing the kind of things necessary to test out the ideas that we have around what might make a better future, be it a company or a new medical treatment or even just a new way of doing business, are in some cases, if not explicitly illegal, they're what I like to call pre-legal. So the challenge of actually doing these things, particularly in the areas that matter the most, because I think that we've had 10, 20 years of extraordinary innovation around consumer-facing services and consumer-facing goods, Uber, Airbnb, all these sorts of things. We've sort of solved those easy problems. The real challenges of the 21st century, where the real hard work and heavy lifting needs to be done, are in the heavily regulated industries, like education, like transportation, like healthcare, like security, like energy. And you can't just sort of Uber your way into a new energy grid because things will blow up and critical services will fail, right? No disrespect intended to Uber or people who follow that business model. But you have to work hand in hand with a visionary government partner to be able to get the permission to test these things out and to prototype them so that you can learn the lessons you need in order to do the next version of the design, iterate to get to the solution that you want. So we learned that with a 3D printed office because, Dubai's economy, about 15% of Dubai's real economy is linked to construction, architecture, and real estate. It's part of Dubai's brand. There's a massive expertise around construction and building here. But like every industry, it is in the process of being digitally disrupted. So instead of waiting for someone else to come up with a solution for what digital disruption in the building industry might look like, we had assembled a professional group of academics and policy people and construction industry people and architects. And we said, well, how do you think 3D printing is going to impact the built environment? And so we had a lot of conversations and sort of generated a social language for that. But out of that group, someone proposed a joint venture to actually design and build one of these things. And I have to say, I was a little bit surprised when this happened because I thought we were at least 5 years away from 3D printed buildings. But it turns out that this company worked with a Chinese manufacturer and had some local investors and some American engineers and put together a proposal that we could fund and that we could buy and decide, let's build this building. You've heard the expression, a picture's worth 1,000 words.
Yes.
When you're building the future, a prototype is worth 1,000,000 pictures because you know things, you discover things that you wouldn't otherwise even know were questions that had to be answered until you did it, right? It's that tangible act of creation. So what we ran into when we were building that building, though, aside from the complexities of the technology and the partners and stuff involved, was that actually there was no building codes for 3D printed cement.
No building codes.
How do we evaluate the safety of this? How do we actually get a certificate of occupation for this thing? And we're lucky because we work under the instruction of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed, the Prime Minister and the ruler of Dubai, and our job is to test these things out and to evaluate these things in a sort of safe but risky way, safe but ambitious way. We had the support of the local government and the engineers and the fire department, and we were able to find a way of permitting the building which would enable us to ensure it was safe but also legally build the building. But that's a good example of this sort of pre-legal space that all innovators have to work with. That it wasn't that 3D printing was explicitly forbidden, right? It was that there just was no law for it.
Yes.
So it's not technically illegal, it's just not legal yet.
It's pioneering, so it's going to need all those testing.
Exactly. And that, all of the most important things are in this pre-legal space, in my opinion. If you look at autonomous transportation, look at some of the fascinating things around applying artificial intelligence in the public sector or around any of the most important things that involve our children, our health, people's lives.
How drones are changing how we do a lot of things, also still in that gray regulations area.
Precisely.
Some of the services.
Precisely. So Dubai Future Foundation, a lot of our recent initiatives have designed to sort of be this sort of acceleration or scaling mechanism for testing these pre-legal innovations to encourage companies and partners around the world to view Dubai as a testbed for these potentially game-changing next-generation approaches to not just technological solutions, right? I mean, you guys are a wonderful example here, right? It's using technology in the service of a new way of providing education or in the service of providing a new way to encourage people in the arts or culture or creative industries. And And I haven't found anywhere else in the world, frankly, that has this unique combination of vision and of willingness to try things out, but also this demand to actually do something with it, right?
I think I agree with that. Yes.
that Dubai and the UAE represents. And so right now, at this particular moment in time, at this particular place in history, the UAE is really doing something special. And I think that having people like you, and you just look around us where we are, all of the companies and startups and partners within a stone's throw of this table is testament to that.
Yes. So tell us about this future. What is Dubai Future Foundation's vision for the future?
That's great. So now that we have, now that we've grown from beyond our own startup phase, when I started working on the project, it was still within the Prime Minister's office, and there was technically no employees involved. So
wow.
skunkworks style. But then when the foundation was created, it was just 2 of us, and then we grew to about 7 people, and now there's almost 100 employees on staff doing various different programs, and in the old days, our job was to help articulate that vision. But I would say now we have 36 different government departments, all having futures teams, and with our 10X program, and involved in the future accelerators. Our job is actually to help I would say curate or cultivate or conduct a grand vision, a synthetic vision of the future, because the UAE leadership has a very clear direction where it wants to go. And you see this in the national plans, 2021 plan. You see this in the Area 2070, the 2071 plan itself, which is the 100-year anniversary of the country.
Yes.
There's a lot of national targets. So the vision has been set at a high level. And now our job is to help provide some flesh to that vision and help accelerate and encourage all the different people who are responsible for that, from energy to transport to education to the airlines to the real estate companies, to take bold steps in that direction, bold strides in that direction. Because it's one thing to set a vision, very clear targets. It's another thing to then provide the enabling environment necessary to fulfill that.
Right.
But again, as anyone who's ever built a company or designed a product or tried to do something new knows, the devil is always in the details.
Yes.
So it's really getting down nitty-gritty into that testing and prototyping phase, and then finding the right partners and continue to support and encourage people as they go on that journey.
So we are in a context of accelerating change here. How do government organizations need to do, what do they need to do differently in order to deal with this kind of accelerating change?
That's a great question. We tend to talk about 3 major changes that we are already experiencing. The first is obviously climate change and resource insecurity that is already having profound impact on every aspect of our lives, and unfortunately looks like it's going to continue to get more severe at a more accelerated pace year by year. For a country like the UAE that imports about 90% of its food and desalinates about 90% of its water, that's an existential threat.
Yes.
So gaining a strategic point of view on the reality of the world today, right, not just 20, 30 years from now, is the first key skill that anyone working in this field needs to understand. Some of the classic futurists, some of my mentors, Peter Schwartz, for example, from Global Business Network, calls this reperceiving the present. It's about adjusting our understanding of the world and our mental models to the way the world actually has changed when we weren't paying attention. Yes. And so the first step for any organization is just to look really critically at what its assumptions are, and how you think the world is and how you think it works and how you think you fit into it, and kind of take the wool off your eyes and really imagine, well, actually, where is this not conforming to my belief? And once you get a more accurate understanding of the world, be that through the speed, urgency, and threat of climate change, or the impact of automation on the workforce, or any of these things, then you can start to think creatively about the possibilities that these changes enable. And that's where you get into the creative side of things that I think is most exciting, and also diverges most strongly from the traditional Foresight world, which is very analytical and left brain. Because that gets into the territory where there is no right answer, right? There's no solution. There's nothing you can solve for. This is about coming up with creative concepts, right? Generating synthetically new ideas or recombining other ideas in such a way that is a very right brain and emotional endeavor at the same time. Of course, you need your rigor, you need your research, but as anyone who has ever designed a product or created a poster or composed a bit of music will know, you can't just analyze your way into a new DJ set or a new piece of a new painting. You have to
actually go through it.
You have to go through it and do it. So it's about that, generating the skills and the culture necessary to create these synthetic, and I mean this not in an artificial sense, I mean this in the synthesis sense, bringing something into being that didn't exist before. That's a very different skill set than the kinds of skills which most organizational bureaucracies or, in fact, MBAs and business schools teach you. So understanding the way the world is changing, what the potentials are in the future, finding those spaces of adjacent possible where there's some scope for action, and then cultivating a network of people who can come up with crazy new ideas and then bring those ideas into some small prototypical realization are three key skills which we try to work with our partners throughout the Dubai government and all of our partners in the world to recognize, this looks like a different kind of employee, right? This requires a different kind of an organization. The reward structure, the hours, the clothes, the kinds of people you're going to end up working with is a very different picture than what you would normally consider to be a traditional government bureaucrat or civil servant or MBA graduate. So these are the three key things that I think anyone, be they in government or in private sector, needs to start to really tackle in order to become more effective in the 21st century. But because so many of the changes necessary are in regulated industries, I think it's particularly essential for government because history has shown us that government has always been involved in the most important long-run transformational changes. Silicon Valley wasn't Silicon Valley until it had 40 years of investment from the federal government and from the academic network there and all the technology transfer programs and all of the fundamental investment in R&D that led to the soil necessary to create ultimately the venture capital ecosystem, and the technology was patient and long enough so that then someone like Steve Jobs could come together and bring the iPhone, for which every single component was invented by the U.S. government, right? Everything from RAM to computers to the internet to radios to touchscreens, all of that stuff was directly funded and or prototyped in government labs and research facilities. But it was the creative synthesis of someone like Steve Jobs who could pick up that pieces in such a rich ecosystem and put them together. So really, it's essential that we develop these three capabilities, and also it's essential that we, and I mean capital W, we start to demand more of our leaders and support the more visionary ones who are really taking the hard questions on the nose, right? And again, the UAE is a leading example of this. Singapore, China, very interestingly enough, right now, these are political leaders who are saying we are facing a major social, economic, ecological transition. Mm-hmm. We need to enact big, bold experiments that are maybe going to be painful in the short run, that some people will win from and some people will lose from, but we have to do it to survive, and on the other side, we'll have a better world. We have to support visionary leaders like that and help them do their job because really that's what the future depends upon. You went right ahead and answered my next question without my asking it. I wanted to ask you about how government can impact through their policy to enable innovation and to help, obviously, human progress and how we can go forward. So you touched upon the Museum of the Future earlier. I wonder if you can tell us some more about what we can expect from it and a possible launch date? Yep, sure. And I think that it's sort of funny if you would think, why would a government innovation agency or sort of future creation agency like the Dubai Future Foundation be building a museum of the future, right? And the museum is a funny word because museum has these such retrospective connotations associated with it. You normally think mummies and objects from the past. But the word muse means inspiration. Yes. So a museum is a place of inspiration. So in that sense, the Museum of the Future is a place of inspiration about the future. And the experiences that we are designing and developing for it right now are using 21st century approaches to these 21st century challenges. As I explained before, this is speculative design, experiential futures, immersive theater. It's about involving you in a world where you are an agent, you have activities, you understand the world by interacting with that. Not here's an object on a pedestal and it's a flying car. And you can't touch it. And don't touch it, right? So the reason that the UA leadership has invested in the Museum of the Future is because it turns out to be one of the most effective ways of engaging a vast portion of society in the world in a conversation about the kind of future that we want to have. And that's the most important first step, I would argue, that we have to develop a conversation around the future which is not just dystopian, which we get a lot of from Hollywood, or utopian, which everybody immediately always dismisses because neither of those are grounded in a reality. So we've developed this phrase, which I like to call protopian futures, positive, proactive, prototypical futures. And the Museum of the Future is designed to to create a global conversation around protopian futures. Yes, the future is challenging. Yes, there are existential threats coming. Yes, we have real problems today that we have to face. But look, this is a vision that we've developed together about the way the world could be better if we work together to get through these challenges, right? And in a kind of Ivan Illich kind of way, it becomes this object by which people can associate, and everyone thinks, oh yeah, future education. Yeah, I saw that digital sand table at the museum. I know what you mean when you say constructivist learning in game-based environments. It creates these things that people that are like these gravity wells, these attractors to get to galvanize people around, and then they want to see that. So actually, by creating a sort of new media or contemporary media type of environment that is really exciting and beautiful and awesome, and addressing the most exciting opportunities and scary challenges of the 21st century, turns out to be a really clever way of developing policy support for the kinds of challenges and changes necessary for a government like the UAE to enact over the long term. So it's about engaging people in conversations about the future. It's about developing a common language, and it's about helping people feel like they have a place in the creation of that future.
Yes.
And for us as a government, actually hear what people want to see, right? And what are people concerned about, and engage them in the co-creation of these, not just the exhibits and the experience themselves, but the actual creation of the policies and prototypes and the kinds of things that you see already around us. So in many ways, everything in the Area 2071 and the Dubai Future Accelerators and the 3D printed building, all of this is prototyping the kind of things that will be happening in the museum.
Yes, at the Museum of the Future. Let's move the conversation to education. What do you think are some of the challenges that face education today?
Well, aside from the fact that it's just totally unfit for the emotional, social, or knowledge purposes required of us in the 21st century.
Yes.
We were talking about at the beginning of the podcast how we all have experience at Burning Man, and this summer I had the privilege of bringing my whole family to Burning Man, including my kids.
You took your whole family to Burning Man?
It was awesome.
With your kids? How old are your kids?
8 and 10.
Well done, Mr. Raford. That is fantastic.
It was awesome. And in fact, my 67-year-old mom came with us as well.
No, the whole family. I love it. I love it.
And, the reason I raise this example now is because at first my kids were a little overwhelmed,
Of course.
But I would say by day 2, they were like sponges.
Yes.
And it just reminded me how kids' minds in particular, but I think all of our minds and hearts in general, are capable of so much synthesis, absorbing so much, making sense of so much. It's such a higher bandwidth than my kids at least get exposed to in school.
Yes.
And so in the 7 days that we were there, because we arrived super early and left super late, they like blossomed. It was like a sponge that you pour water on. And we'd wake up in the morning and they were like, okay, we're going to get a costume on. We're going to get on our bike. Where are we going to go? I don't know. Let's go there. What are we going to see? I don't know. We'll discover something.
That is it. That's the spirit. Yes.
It was brilliant. And by the time then when we came back and had them in school, I honestly felt like this is such a waste of time. Like, what a tremendous waste of human potential for millions and millions and millions of children every day being forced to sit through this totally irrelevant, boring, life-sucking experience.
Big resounding yes.
Especially when we have social technologies and ways of creating experiences which help elicit, draw people's full potential forth from them. All right. And so I think that's the biggest problem with education.
How can we make school more like Burning Man?
It sounds like a joke, but truthfully, I mean, the experiential density, the richness and the diversity and the constant challenging of your assumptions and real-time sense-making necessary to make sense of that, not just from an intellectual perspective, but from an emotional perspective.
And physical, too, and being in that environment.
Right. And, I remember at the beginning, probably on day 2, because it's hot and, hydration is an issue and you're biking all over the playa and stuff. We were like, how are you guys doing? And we had to develop a whole new language with them for self-reporting their own energy levels. I was like, okay, it's like we're in a video game. You've got your energy bar, right? How's your energy bar? Like, I'm down to about 30%. Okay, what do you need to do? I think we should go back and get some water and get some snacks. Okay, great. Where are we now? Oh, we're at 3:30 in G. Where do we need to go? Over there. Okay, let's find a way.
Oh, wow, that's fantastic. So many life lessons right there.
Totally so.
That you don't learn at all at school.
Right.
Everything is so structured and regulated the whole way through. You don't get the opportunity to actually learn these things for yourself.
And that is crippling us.
Yes.
Right? It's crippling us. And it's not, and this is why I am, whilst, I myself am scientifically trained and kind of a nerd, like I am somewhat, I take these sort of calls for greater STEM education with a great grain of salt, right?
Yes. Yes.
Technical skills are important. Yes, we need to understand how the universe works from a physics perspective and a chemistry perspective and a biological perspective, right? But it's almost like that's just the raw material from which you need to build a narrative of purpose in your life, right? And you need to have the social skills necessary to meet strange, weird people that you don't feel entirely comfortable with and develop a common language with them and understand what they're interested in and what they like and what they're afraid of and find a common ground, build a common ground where one doesn't exist, and create a future together. And, in a very microcosmic scale, just waking up in the morning at Burning Man and thinking, what are we going to do?
Yes.
Is a tiny example of the kind of bigger questions that we all face in the world right now. Like, okay, what are we going to do? What's our energy level? Who is feeling good now? Who's not feeling good right now?
What are our resources?
What are our resources? Do we want to go out and get sunstroke and argue and be angry that your sister has a cooler costume than you do and that you don't get to go on that slide or this art project, Or do we want to try and create some synthetic plan where we all get to have fun together and discover something new? Like, it's a metaphor for the global situation right now. So, education, I would hope, yes, distance learning, all these things are wonderful, and so many people in the world don't even have access to the most fundamental, basic levels of education, right? Mm-hmm. That I do hope that technologies of machine learning and distributed learning will be able to provide an upskilling, the likes of which we've never seen before. But ultimately, the thing that is so exciting about 21st century educational possibilities is this greater realization that there's a bigger game afoot.
Of course.
And it's going to draw everything out of us to be able to both realize that game but also realize these challenges.
Do you think schools are open to change?
I think they are increasingly so. Yeah, I think that as we have seen, I turned 40 this year, and I remember my friends who in college who went into teaching very idealistically and very with high aspirations and stuff, and how they just have been ground under the testing school system, particularly in the United States. It's just brutal, right? Now many of them are in positions of administration, they're in positions of leadership, and so my generation has gone, I hope will be the last generation that goes through that system and says, right, we tried to do it your way and it's not working, and now there's this deep recognition that there needs to be a new way, and that opens the space for your generation or other subsequent generations to fill that space of possibility with new solutions and new experiments.
I do hope so. From the experiences that your friends in administrative roles and education, do you think that they know how to inspire stakeholders to the change that's happening, and that's going to be happening even more in a more accelerated way?
It's a good question. One of my dearest and oldest friends is a guy named Eric Tucker who runs an experimental school in Brooklyn, and he does the hardest work of anyone I know, and I don't just mean working long hours. He and his wife run the school together. And like any startup, they have to get financing, and they have to deal with regulation, and they have to get customers, and i.e. parents and stuff. But what they've chosen to focus on are the poorest members of the New York community who also have developmental disabilities.
Wow. Right?
So you're talking about learning disabilities, social dysfunction. And I remember when I was talking to them about when they created this school, I was like, you guys are, like, hats off, but you're insane.
Yes.
Like, why are you tackling three simultaneously daunting challenges all at once?
Yes.
Like urban poverty and exclusion, developmental disability and learning disabilities and the emotional challenges of that, and creating a new business and a new school model. And he said something that was really inspiring, because he's like, look, if we can make a difference with these kids' lives, right, then we can make a difference in anyone's lives. And they have been doing now for the last 5 or 6 years extraordinary work that I think these extreme examples, these test examples, are the things that have generalizable lessons for the rest of us. And I will provide the school's name after the podcast, so you can put that in the notes and put you in touch with them, because they are just doing extraordinary work.
That gives me so much hope, hearing that someone out there is doing something like this.
Exactly. And I think that there are more and more people who, they believe that nobody should be left behind, like in the true sense of the term, not the sort of policy sense of the term, that every human life is valuable and equal, and that we've been blessed with having great education, decent resources, and we have a right and a responsibility to help raise those around us. And you start with the hardest hit people first. That's a philosophy of sort of self-sacrifice that is going to, I think, prove increasingly necessary in the 21st century. And the depth of empathy and heart that is required to do that hard work, especially when, he is an Oxford PhD, like especially when he could have gone and gotten a hedge fund or been a, senior advisor in the Ministry of Economy or wherever, anywhere he wanted to be, But because of who he is and who his wife is, they chose to really tackle the hardest problems first.
Wow. That is so commendable. It's extremely inspirational.
I just, my heart goes out to them, and I have so much gratitude and respect for them, right? So I think we need more of those examples, and I think more of us should aspire not necessarily to start another billion-dollar unicorn program, but what is the social equivalent of a billion-person unicorn project?
A big resounding yes to that too.
So, but I should say it's easier than ever, right? I mean, now the world is falling apart, and in the cracks of the failing 20th century, there's vast opportunities for a new 21st century to be created, and we are in such an extraordinary position, like more so than any human being in the history of the earth. Like I was watching this great Louis C.K. comedy clip last night about the bit about airplanes and cell phones.
Yes.
It's so funny.
Yes.
Because my kids were complaining about something, and I was like, there's some swearing in here, but watch this. Like, you think your phone is too slow? Try building your own. But he has this great line of, people complaining that the airplane is like 5 minutes late on the runway. And he's like, you're like a Greek god. You're in a throne. You're flying through the air. And you're going to land on these huge inflated tires. You can't even conceive how they inflate the tires. Like it's New York to LA in 6 hours. It used to take 6 weeks, and you die along the way. So really, truly, we are in a moment of extraordinary opportunity. And if you have a half decent idea and you're half decently articulate, you can find money to do anything. And as the situation gets more and more severe, there are going to be more and more people in positions of power who are going to be willing to take bigger and bigger risks to test these things out. So it's a great time to be doing this work.
So would you say you're optimistic?
Deeply. What
are you most optimistic about?
Oh, that's a good question. There's a lot of millennials get a lot of flack. I have a younger sister who's now 28, and she isn't on social media. Mm-hmm. She barely texts. All her friends are like within a 5-minute drive of her house. She chose not to go to college because she was just like, I don't buy this. I don't know what I want to study. I'm not going to spend your money trying to do something which I don't really see the value in. And now she's 28, and now she's just, after searching around for a while, just discovering who she is and what she wants to do, and she's building an interesting business. And I think that it's like the people who are now in their early to mid-20s, these people are the ones who are going to refuse to go into the traditional industries, right? Whereas my generation was like, okay, we're a bridge generation. We're like, I know a better world, but I also know how to work at power and at scale in the old world, and I'm going to be that bridge, all right? I'm going to go and transform things from the inside, and that's why I love the UAE, right? You have visionary leadership to transform things from the inside, right? That's what all our programs are about. But my younger sister's generation, and I think her friends and people like you guys, maybe some people listening to this podcast, they don't have the patience. Like, I don't want to wait 15 years to become a Futurist-in-Chief with the Dubai government. I don't want to have to work through that. I want to make change now. Life is short, YOLO, right? So that's really inspiring. I think that a lot of young kids now have the benefit of this extraordinary technology at their fingertips. They have this extraordinary language for discussing and generating possibilities with each other and making it happen. That is going to save the world, right? And those people, the majority of them, they're not from Europe and North America, right? True. 85% of the world's population lives outside of Europe and North America, right? I mean, the future is the global South and the global East, and there's a very different perspective that these young kids take to the challenges that we face, and that's profoundly exciting and inspiring because that's where the future is being built.
So before we end, I would like to ask you, why do you like the title of our podcast, The Adjacent Possible?
So The Adjacent Possible is a beautiful phrase which I first discovered working as a designer, right? And again, trying to synthesize this left brain, right brain analysis and creative generation of ideas. There is a lot of research that in how scientists work and designers work, in particular, a lot of architecture work. And one of my favorite phrases was, a scientist will study every aspect of a question before they propose an answer, whereas a designer will propose 1,000 answers to better understand the question. And that the concept of a space of possibility, I mean, there's grounding in this in statistics and number theory, but also when we're talking about innovation, generation of new ideas, creating new possibilities from something that wasn't there before, it's not just like anyone can create anything at any time, right? There are certain conditions that if you look at them a little bit adjacent, a little bit to the left, maybe with a little bit different color glasses on, or a little bit upside down, you see something that is possible that is just around the corner, right? Just next to the way things are being done. And so the phrase adjacent possible is so rich with meaning because it describes a possibility space, which in and of itself is a profound concept if you really think about it. There's this there's an infinite way that things could be. Some of things are easier to get to, and some of things are more likely and more probable, and they're just right next door to us. Some things are more profound and more radical, and they're kind of far away, but you can chart a journey to them. So the adjacent possible describes that space of possibility. I'm sort of being tautological here, but describes that space, that mapping of what is possible in the world around us, and suggests a bit of a playbook for how to get there. Right? Seek out the adjacent possible. Get in there as quickly as possible, seed it with some almost awesome stuff, and then new possibilities will open up around that, and you can kind of adjacent your way into something that used to seem impossible before.
Noah, it has been such an absolute pleasure to have you on this podcast. I'm buzzing. My smile has been ear to ear with everything that you've said today, and I would love to hear you talking more and more and more. Thank you so much for coming to our podcast.
Thank you, guys. It's such a joy. I'll send you some links and references and stuff if you want to follow up on any of this work. So it's an absolute pleasure. Keep up the good work, guys.
Thank you.
Bigger adjacent possibles.